Good evening, everybody. I have 6:30. I believe the chair is on. Chair Brunel, would you like to call the meeting to order?
Yes, sir, ma'am. Sorry. Just trying to deal with my children so that they are not going to need me much for the next hour and whatever. Calls meeting to order, 6:30. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the
republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. We will start with comments from the audience. Are there any comments from the audience tonight? Sure.
Jen, you're on mute.
Okay, wasn't sure if I was up or not. I know as you guys are getting ready to head into budget season, you will be, eventually looking through everything with a fine-tooth comb and seeing what we budgeted for next year. I just wanted to put a plug in for continued support for a lot of the online subscriptions that we subscribe to this year to help with our hybrid and distance learning model. I know I speak for a lot of my colleagues when I say that a lot of these programs that were meant to kind of tie us over until we got back to normal are actually proving to be extremely effective, regardless of what type of teaching and learning environment we're in. I know personally a lot of the new programs I've used this year have just really increased student engagement, are helping with, increasing the number and types of formative assessments we can give the students. So even though hopefully we will be back to normal next year or more normal circumstances, we would love
this meeting is being recorded.
We would love the continued support for a lot of the online services that we're taking advantage of this year, because we really have seen a benefit to them. That's my budget. That's my budget plug.
Thank you.
Do we have any others? Anything submitted?
Nothing submitted.
Okay.
Thank you, Jen.
Do we have any additions to the agenda tonight?
We do not.
Okay. So we'll move on to routine business items. Looking for a motion to approve the minutes of the October 8th, 2020 Board of Education virtual business meeting.
So moved. This is Chris Davey.
Do we have a second?
Second, this is Ann.
Thank you. Is there any discussion or editing to these minutes? Hearing none. All those in favor, vote aye.
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 Anyone opposed? I will abstain as I was not present. And that passes. We'll move on to the Board of Education committee reports, which buildings and grounds first.
Okay, this is Scott. I just we got an update from John a couple days ago at a meeting we had online. Some updates on what the COVID activities in the schools have been. The custodians have been cleaning and disinfecting constantly. The restrooms are being cleaned 3 times daily, and all high touch points are being cleaned frequently. The 5 electrostatic sprayers that we purchased are being used with the Clorox chemical. Touchless soap dispensers and water bottle fillers are being installed as they're delivered. The ventilation system is being maintained, filters are being changed. And the temporary air conditioning that was installed at BCS for use in September and October has been removed. It had apparently some success, certainly was better than nothing, but we were also lucky not to have the heat that we've had in previous years. Moving forward, there is currently 1 custodian out on leave and a temporary person's been hired. The snow equipment and trucks are being checked and being ready for use in the upcoming season. The replacement tractor for the high school has been ordered. Hope to have that by the end of the year. The replacement truck has also been ordered. It's supposed to be arriving in January. These are items that were on last year's capital list. And then Casal and John are working on the RFQ for engineering services for the roof and HVAC projects at BCS. Moving on to Kappa, I think everyone should have received the updated Kappa list. If you'll remember, for fiscal year 21, we had two different categories. We had the items that we thought we could pay for with leftover funds from previous projects. Those are the 4 items at the top. We do have a balance from those projects that we're going to fund these of a little over $160,000. So we are able to fund them, but the decision has been made to basically fund them as needed. We're trying to hold off on the energy management system to see if we can, how that works with the potential upgrade to the HVAC system for the project coming up. And the Bolton electric range, don't replace it until it breaks is the mantra on that one. For the work that's being done this year under the approved funds that were in last year's budget, I mentioned already that the engineering services we're going to be putting an RFQ out for that.
Scott, can you hang on a second? The soccer, so I just need to throw out there that the soccer
I was gonna, yeah.
needs to be removed. Sorry about that.
I was going to cover it, don't worry. We tried to get it fixed. The lock, the windows, second phase of the windows have been completed. Like I said, the dump truck and the tractor have been ordered. The tennis courts, I believe, is nearly finished. If it's not complete, the construction piece of it. And the soccer field was on the approved list that we had last year. It did go to the town, but the discussions last spring were to push that forward, potentially include it in one of the bond package that we have going forward. So what we really want to do is be looking to next year's capital list for the Board of Ed that we're going to be wanting to talk to the Board of Selectmen December and January. This list is essentially what it was last year, with the exception of that soccer fields did get moved down. And we are expecting that it's going to be covered in two different manners. There's likely going to be, because of the number of projects in town that have to be done, ours, the BCS roof being the most expensive from our list. There's work to be done with the municipal center, the demolition. There's potential for a fire truck and some other things that there's likely going to be a bond issuance put together. That should cover our big ticket items. And like we said, we may be including the soccer field in that as well. The second will be items that are on the capital list that goes toward the spending that has to be the minimum of 1% or $1 million that's included in every year's budget. And so those will be potentially the exterior door replacement, greenhouse removal at BCS, upgrading commons at the high school, the audiovisual systems, completing hopefully the window replacement at BCS, and the potential for doing having to pay for an inspection evaluation of the septic system. This may or may not be required, but it's been on the list, it's been forecast, and we want to keep it there until we know whether we need to do it or not. So that's the list. I don't know, Kristen, do you have anything you wanted to add to that? We're going to be looking for the board to approve this so that when the Board of Selectmen does call a meeting for review, that we're armed and ready with our list for next year.
No, you covered it all. Great job. Sorry about the not removing that line after all that conversation.
That's okay.
Sorry.
Any questions?
But
Call for a motion.
Yeah, so I guess we're looking for a motion then to approve our CAPA list going forward to the full CAPA committee.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second, Ben.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Again, opportunity for questions. Hearing none, all those in favor of our moving our CAPA list forward to the full CAPA committee, say aye, please.
Aye.
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 Opposed? Anyone who would like to abstain? That carries unanimously. Thank you for that. We'll move on to Finance Subcommittee. Ann?
Yeah, thank you. All right, so finance, the budget is 22% expended at this point. Special education is an ever-changing landscape. And I'd like to ask the superintendent to go through our list of October transfers, please.
Thank you. Casal? She looks frozen. Oh, there we go. Okay. Before I do this, I owe Mr. Davies and Ben Davies an apology because we lumped buildings and grounds in with the CAPA because Andrew and Scott have always been together on that. So I apologize profusely, Ben. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no big deal. I understand.
Sorry. Okay, so we have some limited transfers this month. The first is a reclassification to cover the cost of the coding part of the new fourth grade computer curriculum. The second part is to cover shortfall in the cost of PSAT tests. The next is to do a reclass to correct the online French instruction for grade 8 from supplies to purchase services. We have a transfer for porta potty rentals for athletics due to COVID-19. We had to rent porta potties for athletes because they couldn't come into the building once school was over at the end of the day because we had started our cleaning and disinfection process. We had to transfer for BCS, BHS World Language distance learning materials. And we had to replace the television in the Bolton High School main entrance, and we just needed a reclass there because that no longer worked. So that concludes our October transfers. So now I think we can go on to the financial report. Casal, please. Oh, yeah, we're going to do this first. So as you know, there's been a lot of back and forth with the state about the coronavirus relief funds. We were approved to have the money that we had been allotted for transportation and the small amount of money that had been allotted to go towards personnel costs under basically under custodial costs. So our total amount awarded to Bolton is $133,826. We were able to identify these monies have to be spent by December 30th. There's been a lot of back and forth with the state about whether or not they would accept encumbered funds versus goods received. We just did not want to get involved in that at all. So the numbers that you see here are goods that we have paid for and actually received. And we totaled the full amount. We have gotten approval for this, and we are just waiting for the drawdown funds to be placed into the account. So there is an accounting of what we spent the money on. Are there any questions on this list?
Can you just clarify, Kristen, because it says on this sheet that's showing paid out of grant funds 54,000. You're saying that everything on there has already been paid for, though?
So we did not have to pay the bill for the AC out of our monies because we just got the bill. So we're going to be able to pay that bill out of the monies as they come in. So it's not an in and out kind of thing. It'll just be an out of the grant. The other monies we had already spent and purchased the goods and spent board monies with that. And so the board monies will be reimbursed to the operations budget and a small amount to the instructional budget.
Thank you for explaining.
Yep,
So,
no problem.
so some of those expenditures were previous transfers, partly funded by transfers that we've made on previous meetings, or
No,
so we don't have to account for where these go back into.
we're about to show that to you momentarily.
Oh, okay. All right.
Good questions. I thought it would be helpful for you to see this part first. All right, Casal, we're ready for the next piece, please. Okay, so under regular instruction, you'll see that we have the $344 went for wireless speakers that we needed in the gym at center school so that we could spread the kids out and they could actually hear the teachers. We're currently projecting full expenditure in regular instruction, and I anticipate we're going to continue to project that through the end of this year just based on just the constant changes that are happening. And, you heard Jen very clearly articulate all about the online subscriptions and the pieces that we need. And I feel like we discover new ones every day. Currently, we're under student support services, looking for full expenditure. We have had a placement change. Casal, can you go back up, please? Thank you. That we're currently trying to manage. So that will be a stay tuned with special ed. And then on the next page, under administration and support, we're projecting full expenditure at this point in time. And you see there under operations, the $79,322. These were expenses that were reimbursed by approved coronavirus relief funds. At that point, we were simply using monies in John's budget that had been allotted for other things that we're going to need throughout the year. And we were just using his budget to expend for these items so that we could get them ordered, get them in, and then be able to get reimbursed from this fund. And then you also see that in salaries and wages. So in salary savings for our unfilled positions, we have $122,000. We have $119,000 in new hire savings, which has been offset by $58,000 for the music position. You may recall we made the music position, the 0.6 music position at center school went from a 0.6 to a 1.0. Based on our lower enrollment in choice and the fact that we had monies available here, we moved that position into our salary line because I had to ensure that we needed to have that for the remainder of this year. Plus, I don't think that the choice grant is going to be able to continue to sustain that position anyways, just based on our lower numbers. In personnel benefits, we had a savings of $46,000 on unfilled positions, which I have told you about throughout the past months. We had $163,000 savings for new hires, but that was offset by an increase of $98,000 in insurance changes that we did not know about, that were not put on the budgeting form that we do each fall as part of our budgeting process. We've had good luck, if you will, in years past, the last several years, where we had minimal, if any, insurance changes that were a large negative number for the board. This is a large number, and I've talked about this before in Board of Finance meetings. And this year, we've been fortunate that things have happened the way they've happened and that we have these unfilled positions, as well as, the savings that we had for the new hires that we made. Any questions on this page? Chris? I can't see everybody, so you have to holler out, okay?
Okay. So I just want to make sure I understand the process correctly, and especially since we'll be talking about grants later on this evening. So the money that we're being reimbursed from the state is treated as a grant, and that money is not going to get added into our projected expenditures column in any way. Is that correct?
That was my understanding from the state, yes.
Okay, so it's basically treated as a
one-off.
separate budget, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
So my next question then was, did we budget for, in our regular budget, for any of the items that are now being reimbursed by the state? Because at the time we weren't sure if they were going to be reimbursed by the state. And if so, how are we then going to expend that money that's been freed up?
So we didn't budget. Casal, can you go back to the list of items that we purchased with the coronavirus relief funds? So we didn't budget for any of these, Chris. These are all COVID-related expenditures under PPE, cleaning supplies, and safety, which is the category that we were allotted money for.
So when we were talking about the budget in the spring, and at that time we knew that COVID, that we would have extra expenses, you weren't already at that point including PPE, because I know you were buying PPE at that time, but presumably that was out of... Go ahead.
We were buying some PPE, certainly in the spring, because we needed to, because I wasn't sure when we were coming back. But we bought a lot more PPE. This is all monies in this year's fiscal budget. This is not anything from last year's fiscal budget.
Okay.
So when we...
Right, and I understand that. So when we went ahead and purchased all of the items on this list, at the time, because we didn't know we were going to be refunded by the state, we took it out of the operations budget for the most part. Is that correct?
Correct.
So what would we have done then? That's when, if we had not been reimbursed and the operations was all used up.
Casal, can you go to the salaries and benefits page, please?
Oh, can I add also that we made our budget before any real understanding of COVID was happening. And if you recall, during the budget process in the town meetings and the Board of Finance meetings, additional contingency was put into the town budget to cover COVID costs that weren't recognized in the Board of Selectmen's or Board of Education's budgets because it was done too early.
Right.
So we didn't have a budget. We weren't anticipating when we had our meetings, and there was extra money that was put in place by the town should we need to draw on it, is the way I understood it during the budget process.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. I guess I just want to make sure that it's clear to anyone on the Board of Finance who might be paying attention that we did have a plan in place for what our operations in transportation budget was going to be spent on. There was a possibility that those funds might have had to go to COVID expenditures, but now since we've been reimbursed, we can essentially go ahead with what our original budget plan was. Is that an accurate assessment?
So yes and no. So here's the issue, right? We still have things that we're likely going to need to purchase that are COVID related. So you're going to see when we get to the last page, my request for an additional $20,000 to be transferred out of salaries into the operations budget. Currently, John has $19,000 and some odd dollars. I want to say $19,238 unencumbered funds. So that leaves us just that amount for anything that may go haywire, wrong. And we know from last year, we had a number of things, right, that went south on us pretty quickly. And that doesn't include, any monies for PPE, additional sanitizing supplies, any COVID related type things. For example, one of the things that has hit John's budget was my request to replace the water fountains with bottle refill fountains. Can't have kids drinking out of the water fountains. It's not safe. So for every water fountain we were able to do that at Center School, we have done that. We've got a couple that are like way in the wall. And so we're trying to figure that piece out now. So, we have costs like that we did not budget for. So I want to be clear. There was a plan, and I think I have said this continuously, that I was not concerned at this point, and maybe I said that to the Board of Finance, and I haven't said it to the Board of Ed, to be honest with you. I don't remember who I've said what to anymore, to be honest. That I felt that we were in a pretty good spot of managing within our own budget. I knew that we had savings from our new hires. I knew that we had positions that we have not filled. And I've taken into account in the salary savings that you see right now, one position that I know we're not going to be able to fill, and one paraprofessional position, I believe. Casal, is that right in here?
Yes, a paraprofessional position, the CODA position, and the SPED position.
Right. So the CODA is the occupational therapist that was overseen. It was like overseen by the occupational therapist, and our CODA left, and our occupational therapist that had to oversee her was already working for us 1 day a week, and based on our student needs, if she worked 2 days a week, we would meet all our students' needs. So we didn't hire another CODA. We had some savings as a result of the occupational therapist staying with us and just picking up an extra day. So we've actualized that savings. We've actualized the savings of one of the special ed positions and one of the paraprofessional positions. We still have a special education position we're trying to fill. We have a number of paraprofessional positions we are trying to fill. We've been trying to fill them since July, some of them since June and late May. So I feel like right now I can't let those go yet because I'm not sure what the coming months are going to bring and what our needs are going to be. So there is possibly additional actualized savings. I also want to call out the fact that it doesn't mean we don't need these positions. It just means there aren't bodies to fill them right now. And I think in the midst of a pandemic, people aren't all that interested in working in a school. Or the flip side of that is they're not interested in leaving the school that they're at now to come to another school. That's part of it too. So did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. Casal, next page, please. So we're currently 22% expended, as Ann shared. As I shared, I am looking for a transfer. This is like a preemptive transfer, if you will, so that John has plenty of money in his account for him to be able to do what he needs to do and for us to be able to order PPE when we need to order it, because it is a scarce commodity right now. And we've done a really good job of having a supply, but I want to maintain our supply as well. So I am looking for a motion to approve the budget status and then to approve the transfer request and to approve the transfer. So we've got 3 different motions we need.
Need 3 or 2? One to do the
we're going to need a total of, to approve the October transfers, right? I'm sorry. Yep. And then we need to approve the $20,000. You're right, 2. Okay.
So the October transfers, just to clarify for everyone, have already occurred. The $20,000 we would approve so that we have the ability to purchase in the future on the most expended part of our budget. So we'll do the October transfers first. Could we have a motion, please, to approve the October budget transfers? I don't know if we can get that page back up. Which are these ones?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the October transfers.
Rhea will second.
Thank you. That was Ben and Rhea, correct. Does anyone have any questions on this part of our discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the approving the October Board of Education transfers and all the categories you see?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that motion carries. Now we'll need a motion to adopt a $20,000 transfer from salaries to operations.
Sorry, I didn't realize I muted myself.
Yeah, that's okay. Sorry.
Okay. Yes, motion to approve the $20,000 for John's budget so that we could continue to purchase PPE and other unexpected costs related to COVID mainly.
So moved. Scott.
Is there a second?
Agreeable second.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone who would like to ask a question or make a comment on this transfer? And to be clear, this is coming out of our salaries portion rather than the benefits side. Okay, hearing no questions. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed? Like to abstain? Hearing none, that also passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Let me pull up my agenda here.
We have a student representative report.
Oh,
please.
yeah, where our student representative reports are. Poor student representatives have been waiting here. I don't even remember who's what this year, so I know. Let's see.
Jack, who's going first?
Yeah.
I'll go. So,
Okay.
the soccer season has just ended this week, and the girls have ended their season on a win against East Windsor on Monday, and the boys play their last game tomorrow at Coventry, and seniors are finalizing their application and starting to apply to college, and they also have a capstone research paper that we're starting as well. And NHS is holding a blood drive on the 15th.
Thank you.
Fall sports came to an end this week. Cross country's NCCC meet was originally going to be yesterday, but it got moved to today. The boys team came in first place and the girls team came in second. Both teams did extremely well. Last week, volleyball finished up their season with a record of 5 wins and 6 losses. The band has started playing in school this week, and it will take some adjusting to get used to the new guidelines, but the first day went very well.
Awesome. Thank you, you guys. I'm sure you have plenty of work to do, Jack and Emily. You are welcome to stay, but you are also welcome to go.
Thank you very much. Do we have any community meetings? Are there such things as community meetings anymore?
Chris?
Sure, I have a couple. I participated in CREC's October meeting, which was virtual, like all of them are these days. Of note, I learned today that CREC plans to go fully virtual the week after Thanksgiving to help mitigate the risk of people traveling over the holiday and possibly being infected by COVID. The decision was made in part because of the state's guidance that any individual traveling to an affected state, which at this point is pretty much the entire country other than I think New Jersey, New York, and maybe Rhode Island, has to quarantine for 14 days upon returning to the state or submit a negative COVID PCR result. So yeah, all the CREC students will be virtual for a week after Thanksgiving. Just prior to the last CREC meeting, I was asked to serve on a new CREC committee that's being formed to look at CREC's governance and bylaws. However, the committee has not yet met and the scope of its work hasn't been clearly explained. So I'm not sure what's going to happen with that or what time period they're looking at. Also of note, CREC has been regularly posting updates on the COVID status of their schools. And as of last week, they had 34 staff and 101 students who were in quarantine. They also had 17 new positive cases, 6 staff and 11 students. For the school year as a whole, they've had 62 positive cases, almost evenly split between staff and students, and more than 500 students in the correct system, which is about 6% of the overall, have had to quarantine at some point since the start of the year. The Bolton Scholarship Fund has continued to meet virtually, and we've been reviewing our scholarship application and scoring criteria. Because of the COVID crisis, we agreed at the October annual meeting not to hold the annual phonathon in 2021. I know our NHS students who have been very helpful in years past will, well, I don't know if they'll be disappointed or not, but we certainly appreciate their help in years past and hope that in years future we'll be able to work with them again under healthier conditions.
Thank you. Anybody
Thank you. Is there anyone else who has attended any community meetings?
Anne?
Yeah, thank you. So PTA met on Zoom for the first time since last spring. So they have a new president, Nicole Sullivan. And Nicole has a long background with the PTA, so she's going to be very helpful for them. There is, it's a different year for PTA, as far as fundraising goes, it's just an entirely different world. Right now it's, Square One Art, which usually happens at this time of year, was all done instead of through the art teacher at BCS. It was done online voluntarily. Parents would upload students' work and order things that way. So that was very different. The book fair is upcoming. That's going to be online. So, instead of having the library, wall to wall with books to purchase, it's going to be, word of mouth. Hopefully parents will, with their students, look for some books on the Scholastic website. They have discussed the idea of doing the walkathon and the gala in the spring if possible, but that's a huge question mark. And as far as enrichment goes and things that PTA sponsors, I know that they've been in discussion with Daryl, and I'm not sure that a whole lot of conclusions have been made at this point. So just, keep on keeping on and see what we can do.
Thank you very much. Is there any other community meetings? Actually, those are about the only ones we have.
Eric, can you get the dog?
Does someone want to talk about the 3-board meeting?
Oh, yeah. Somebody maybe who could see it. Anyone? There was the 3-board meeting, which is mandated by our town charter and is a really meeting of the Board of Selectmen with the Board of Education and the Board of Finance. And it was last week. And we discussed mainly finances, where we stand in relation to normal times, where we stand in relation to our current challenges, and where we project to be in the future. Also discussed townwide capital improvements that are coming up. Big ticket items are the roof at the Bolton Center School for us. The fire department is looking for a expansion of their, an addition, I guess, on the side of their building to house more vehicles, and the town is ever looking for office space. So is there any other main points that I missed? Anyone? I don't think so.
I think you got it.
Yeah, that was the main focus.
I believe, wasn't there a long discussion about new fire trucks? We need to get longer fire trucks.
Yeah, that I guess was the reason for that. They're already rather cramped, and that new truck we're in need of in coming years will be larger and not fit at all, I believe, and they're currently very cramped with like this far between trucks kind of thing, so it can barely get through and when they need to. But that was their, yeah, and the vehicles have already been started to be financed through CAPA for a couple of years now, and that's going to be a big ticket item as well. So thank you. I don't believe there's any other community meetings. Correct me if I'm wrong, anyone, but if not, we will turn things over to the superintendent for the superintendent of schools report.
Great, thank you. I'd like to introduce Joe Spurgeon, who is from Ripple, and he is our broker for CT CHIP. Larissa Carr is our CT CHIP program director, and Chuck Petruccioni is Bolton's insurance broker from Brown & Brown, and they're going to provide you an overview of CT CHIP.
Great, thank you, Kristen.
Thank you.
I'm going to share my screen. Is that turned on? Yep, great.
Joe, can he share his screen?
Looks like I am now, right? Yep. Can you see it?
No.
No?
Yes? I don't see. We don't see it.
Huh, it's allowing me to share. Let me try again. Oh, let me try.
He's just sharing the wrong window. That was working.
There we go. That there now? Do you see?
Yep.
Okay. Trying to get to presentation mode. There we go. Okay, so thank you for having me. My name is Joe Spurgeon. I work for a firm called Lindbergh & Ripple, and we're employee benefit consultants. We do very similar work as Chuck, who is also on the meeting, who works for Brown & Brown. In this case, my role is to serve as the consultant for the CT CHIP collaborative pool. And we'll go into history on kind of how CT CHIP was created. Kristen's our chair, so you probably know a little bit more about it than some of the other boards do, but we'll walk through that. Also in the meeting is Larissa Carr, and she is the CT CHIP administrator. Larissa takes care of a lot of the day-to-day functions of CT CHIP, including making sure billing is accurate. She coordinates a lot of the wellness activities with Cigna, and Larissa and I work very closely together to kind of track claim history and make sure the plan is running as it's supposed to. So getting into a little bit of our history, the first page of the presentation, which I think you do have a copy of, is just the welcome to CT CHIP letter that we have from yours truly, Kristen Hecht, from our chair. So this is pulled from the CT CHIP website and just talks about what CT CHIP is. I'm going to skip over that because it's really kind of bulleted through here in the next slide. So CT CHIP, beginning in March 2018, 9 towns and boards of education, Bolton, Brooklyn, Canterbury's the board only, Columbia, and Thompson, started working together to explore opportunities on collaborating on health benefits. Initially, Union was part of that process as well, but they dropped out fairly early on in the process, mostly because they were very small, only 9 employees. To put that in perspective, the next smallest group has 63 employees. So they dropped out. Their benefits were administered through the state partnership plan. And because those benefits are so rich, it was difficult to try to match them in an affordable way via the CT CHIP pooling model. So while we're not directly affiliated with EastCon, most participants are part of the EastCon service area. EastCon did serve as our initial meeting space, and they also provided a lot of logistical support for us. While technically Larissa is an employee of CT CHIP, she is kind of housed under EastCon, and the EastCon, kind of pays her payroll and handles her health insurance and coordinates her from a technical perspective. But she is your employee, the board's employee, I should say. The goal was to create a collaborative similar to an existing regional collaborative called eChip. Sorry for the phone ringing in the background. eChip is a similar collaborative. It's in the northeast corner like you, but it represents larger towns and boards of education. The big difference between eChip and CT-CHIP, and I'll get into this a little bit more, is the eChip collaborative is a self-funded collaborative. For CT-CHIP, we are at least currently fully insured, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later on. The idea was that we could regionalize these smaller towns and boards of ed, and that usually gives the ability to combine these relatively small pools into larger combined pools. And that provides some advantages, which we'll talk about in a moment. This collaborative, again, is officially known as the Connecticut Collaborative Health Insurance Program, or CT-CHIP. We did conduct an official RFP in 2018 for July 2019. Results were analyzed early in 2019. The participants of the RFP were Anthem, Connecticut, and Cigna. And upon review of the RFP results, as well as the presentations from the vendors, the CT-CHIP board unanimously selected to move forward with Cigna. So Bolton, you have roughly 150 town and board of ed employees, and on your own, as when you're part of the CT-CHIP pool, you're now part of a pool of 560 employees. Large pools provide advantages over small pools. Claims for larger groups are typically more predictable over time, and you're less likely to experience large cost swings year to year. We will talk about the anomaly year that we had this current year. So unfortunately, that first bullet doesn't really apply to our first year renewal, but we're going to talk about that. And Chuck has some really good historical data for you to consider as well. Carrier fixed costs are less per enrollee to reflect larger economies of scales. We have more flexibility in plan design offerings, and carriers are more willing to customize benefits for larger groups. To kind of put that in perspective, all but one of the CT-CHIP groups was not currently with Cigna when we moved over to Cigna as part of CT-CHIP. Thompson was the only entity that was already part of Cigna. Cigna was able to match all benefits for all of our groups. We did not have to change benefits in order to move to Cigna. Had you been a smaller group trying to change carriers on your own, it would be much more difficult to try to match benefits when you change carriers. The next two bullets were very important to the board. Each participant retains control of their own plan design. So there is not one CT-CHIP set plan design. You're members of the Board of Ed. I'm sure there's members of the negotiating committee in this meeting right now. You sit down, you negotiate in good faith with your union. As you know, in the middle of mediation, you're making final tweaks to your plan design offering and your salary. You do not have to worry that you cannot negotiate benefits in a good faith manner with your union, because you can, any benefits that you want, you can negotiate and Cigna will administer. It doesn't matter. You don't have to follow a CT-CHIP template. That was very important to the CT-CHIP board. And also each participant is responsible for their own premium. Premium is set to support the whole pool, but each different plan design within the CT-CHIP entities has a separate premium rate. You pay those premium rates for all of your separate plan designs multiplied by your employees. There is no premium share or premium subsidies taking place between the entities. Each entity is responsible for their own premium. Each entity is represented on the CT-CHIP board of directors. On the board of directors, we also have officers. So Kristen is currently the chair. That's a 2-year term. So that will be coming to an end for her at the end of this fiscal year. And that would go down to the vice chair, would be the next chair. Cigna, as part of the RFP process, Cigna was willing to provide employee assistance plan services at no additional cost. So within our CT-CHIP model with Cigna, that includes free employee assistance program services. Some of you may be familiar with employee assistance plans. They are typically thought of as counseling services that employers provide employees access to counselors. You might be having stress management, anxiety issues, child care issues, but really EAP does a lot more than that. EAP services can help with certain legal issues, for example, creating wills. They can help find elder care. They can help with lots of different issues. We're finding in the last couple of years, and even more recently due to COVID, a larger demand for EAP services. So many of the CT CHIP organizations did not have EAP services prior to joining the CT CHIP program, and we were able to offer that at no cost. Cigna is also providing a $60,000 annual wellness fund. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then I mentioned before that we are fully insured. So in the insurance world, there's basically two types of funding arrangements, and then a lot of kind of alternate arrangements in between. There's fully insured and self-funded. Fully insured is the model most people are familiar with. You pay a premium to a carrier, so we pay a premium to Cigna. They're 100% liable for claims once we pay our premium. That's as opposed to self-funded, where you hire a carrier like Cigna to be your administrator. What they do is they facilitate the network, they facilitate customer service, they facilitate claims adjudication, but the employer is responsible for all claims that are incurred by the plan. So CT CHIP is a fully insured group, but we were able to negotiate what we call a participating contract with Cigna. And so what that does is that provides CT CHIP with a what we call a surplus share arrangement. So to the extent that we outperform claim projections in any one fiscal or plan year, then CT CHIP can benefit from any surpluses that are generated. The surplus share is a one-way share in our favor. So to the extent that we had claims that exceeded projection, like we did last year, we do not owe additional monies back to Cigna. So it's a one-way share. The one caveat to that is we're still finalizing the numbers, but we will be starting this year off with a quote unquote deficit because we know claims were higher than expected. If we were to generate a surplus next year, Cigna would pay themselves back with the surplus to make up for the deficit. But to the extent that we do generate a surplus, we have options with those funds. We can allow Cigna to hold them, which we probably would not do. We can pull them out and hold them as a CT CHIP board. There's the ability to do that. Entities could take payment back if the board approved, or you could offset future renewals. Our thought process going forward is that to the extent that we start to generate surpluses, we may use that in the future to consider being self-funded, but that would be a few to several years away before a decision like that is likely to be made. So I alluded to the first renewal. I know Kristen's done a good job at speaking to you about the first year renewal. It was not a great renewal. It was a 19% increase. That is fairly atypical. But let's kind of talk about what happened. So for this current fiscal year, 2021, the total premium for the CT CHIP pool is $12.6 million. Of that, Bolton's responsible for about $2.2 million of that. So you're 24.3% of the total premium and you're 26.2% of the enrollment. The reason why you're not equal there, right, that your premium percentage and your enrollment percentage is not the same is because each entity has varying benefits. So what this tells me is that overall your benefits are a little less expensive on average than the rest of the CT CHIP pool. And the reason that would be is because you probably have higher cost shares or higher deductibles for those plans. The total premium reflected a 19% increase over 2019-20. Chuck will speak more to that. When I say a rate increase, what I mean is the actual rates before any plan changes and before any enrollment changes. All right, so you may have had, and Chuck will speak to this, but you may have had enrollment changes and or plan changes that made your budget reflect a number different than 19%. For 2019-20, which was our initial year, the total pool was $10.6 million. So the new premium was up $2 million. Bolton's portion was $2.6 million of that. And that represented about the same, 24.3 and 26.2% of the enrollment. Chuck will speak to that exact issue, that even though your rates went up, your total premium is down. So let's look at what drove the 2020 renewal. So first of all, claims far exceeded claim projections for 1920. Initially there was some concern that perhaps Cigna lowballed us in the first year, only to do what, people like to say in the industry as a bait and switch. That is not the case for a few reasons. Chuck and I, one of our roles is to make sure that those types of things don't happen by making sure that any proposals that are offered are accurate. It's not to say we don't accept aggressive proposals, but they need to be accurate. It's also not the case because Anthem and Connecticut's proposals were very similar. Oh, pardon me for 1 second. You snuck in on me. So Anthem and Connecticut had very similar premium proposals. In fact, Cigna was not the cheapest. Cigna was in the middle between Anthem and Connecticut. The reason why we saw the large increase was attributed entirely to large claimants over $50,000. Primarily what happened was, as you're all familiar with, Kristen needs to present you with a budget end of this calendar year or very early in the next calendar year. When Chuck and I are doing projections and Cigna are doing projections, we have to make a projection that's many months away, that your effective date's going to be many months away from when you're making your budget. So we use claim history to do that projection. What happened here was the claim history we use, or Cigna used, to produce the 2019 premiums had many fewer large claimants. In fact, we saw a fairly large increase in large claimants late in the 2018-19 fiscal year, and then actually very early in the year that we moved to Cigna. So those claimants just weren't in what we call the experience, which means we weren't projecting for them. So when we look at large claimants, we're looking at claimants over $50,000. We have 41 claimants over $50,000. That accounted for 4.5 million in total claims. So that's 3% of the CT CHIP membership, representing nearly half of your claims, 46% of your claims. More than half of those that are over 41,000 were also over 75,000. We had 5 claimants over 200,000, and our highest claimant was $508,000. This next bullet. So if you're familiar with self-funding at all, you may have heard of the term stop-loss insurance, which protects you from large claims. Because we're fully insured, we don't really have stop-loss, but we have a what we call an experience protection benefit, which allows us to say to Cigna, hey, assign some of our premium towards this experience protection plan. And if we have claimants over a certain amount, in this case it's 150,000, we take them out of the projection and then add them back in at 150,000. So if somebody was at $300,000, we take them out of the projection and then add them back in at 150,000. So the expected claimants to be $150,000 plus increased 120% from the 19 projection, so from that original year to our 2020 projection. One last thing to kind of look at for these large claimants is if you look at our 1920 ending year, if we average the claims across all members, and so here I'm talking about employees and their dependents. If I take the average per capita cost, we averaged around $7,300 per member in claims. If we look at just those claimants over 50, they averaged at $110,000 per member. But if we look at the claimants that are under 50, they're averaging to less than $4,000, which, and I think Chuck would agree, claimants under $50,000 to average around $4,000 is actually a pretty good indicator. So our claimants that are not catastrophic are doing quite well. It's just that we had a big change in the number of large claimants that came down. One more thing, and then I turn it over to Chuck, I believe. So what we found was when we moved to CT CHIP, each entity, every entity, was able to save fairly significantly over what their 2019-20 proposal was from their current carriers and or any individual marketing that they had done. And for most, it was a decrease over their 2018-19. So as we moved over into CT CHIP, most organizations saw a decrease or at least a flat. On average, premiums decreased for all entities 4.36%. When we look at 2020 versus 2018, so over those 2 years, right, with healthcare trends between 8.5% and 10.5%, we would expect to see increases of 17 to 21% for groups that are performing at trend, where the average CT CHIP entity over that same 2-year period increased 8%. So even though we clearly had a bad 2020 renewal, we still think that in general, the CT CHIP pool is better off than had those entities stayed on their own. With that, I'll turn it over to Chuck with some historical data.
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, everything Joe has talked about thus far is CT CHIP as a whole, which is what affects your bottom line right now because you are in the pool. But I think it is important to look at Bolton's history as well. So I put together kind of a 5-year history so you can see what happened with your claims. And this is you're gonna kind of see what Joe was talking about early on in the presentation about fluctuations of claims, right? You guys only have 150 or so on the plan between the town and the board. And well, that's a decent number of people. From an insurance standpoint, it's not very predictable. Your claims are gonna jump around from year to year. And that's reflected in what happened with your renewals. So we know we got a 19% increase this year that we're in. Last year, like Joe said, you guys actually had a negative making the move to CT CHIP versus what you were paying before. Your rate to rate change was 2.8%. If you actually factor in some other plan changes that accompanied that, your bottom line was minus 3.8%. The year before, so your third year with Connecticut, their baseline increase was a plus 11. Some of that was mitigated with plan changes to get you to about 6.5. The year before that, you had a 10% increase with Connecticut. Again, you were able to mitigate some of that with negotiated plan changes down to 6.8%. And then here's the other side of the coin. The year before that is when Bolton made the change to Connecticut. You had previously been with Anthem. And that year you actually experienced a minus 6.9%. That's what happens a lot in this industry. You make the change from carrier to carrier, and you can see some pretty wild swings, especially, again, at your size. So what I did was say, okay, listen, kind of to what Joe said over the last 2 years, well, how do things shake out over a 5-year period? So if we look at that and add all those numbers up there above, not counting plan changes, your baseline increase over the 5-year period was about 30%, or roughly 6% per year. Again, your actual impact to your bottom line was even lower than that when you factor in plan changes. But just from a rating standpoint, 30% increase over 5 years, 6% per year. And like Joe had just said on the last slide, we're talking about an industry which really consistently over the last 10 years has been in that 8.5 to 10.5% range. So, you know, you're just experiencing the roller coaster of being a small size group. And hopefully by partnering with CT CHIP, that roller coaster flattens out in the long term. So to put it into perspective, the 19 that you guys got last year, our underwriters took a look at Bolton's data by yourself this last spring, like we would have done if you were on your own. So that top bullet point, loss ratio of 98.9%, that means for every dollar you paid into Cigna, they paid out 98.9 cents in claims. That only leaves them 1 cent to pay, keep the lights on and do all the other things they need to do with the money. You know, ideally an insurance carrier, especially in a fully insured situation, would like you to be more 80% loss ratio, maybe 85, anything higher than that. And you're going to start looking at larger renewal increases. We were pretty conservative with this, 8% medical trend, 12% prescription. Honestly, prescription trends probably been a little bit higher than that in recent years. But so that's what we used for our analysis. To try to even things out, we weighted it 70% this last year when things were bad and still gave you 30% credit for the year before. What really hurt Bolton in our analysis was all those large claims that Joe talked about that affected CT chip weren't really much of a factor for Bolton. Despite making up, about a quarter of all of CT chip, you only had one large claimant over 100K, and none of them that even hit that 150K. For comparison, the previous year you had 4 members over 100,000. So while that's great, right? You don't want large claimants. From an underwriting standpoint, it does mean that maybe our body of employees as a whole isn't quite running as well because we can't blame it all on 1 or 2 particularly sick people. So when our underwriters crunched all those numbers, had Bolton been alone by yourself, we would have pegged you at a 34% increase coming into this year. Now, in practice, you would have never gotten a 34. We would have done some negotiating. The fact that you are smaller would have actually helped you in that regard because carriers, they kind of blend. You have a credibility factor, right? So historically, when Connecticut would do their renewals, they considered Bolton's claims really only to be about half credible, which means they blend your experience with their overall book of business experience to come out with a bottom line number. So that 34 that we would say you'd earn on your own would probably have come down in the 20% range. So you really would have ended up right where you're at with CT chip. One other point on this, we've had a great relationship with Connecticut over the years, but this last year in particular, all the renewals we had with them that would have taken place for July 1st, 2020, Connecticut had a particularly difficult year from an underwriting standpoint. They lost a lot of their municipal business this last year because their renewals across the state were coming out very high. So there is absolutely no indication that you would have been any better off had you not made the move to CT chip. In fact, you would have almost certainly been worse off, both strictly here as a 1-year look at things, as well as going into the future. So that's kind of the 5-year overview and an underwriting look at Bolton specific.
Great. So, Kristen, we were going to talk about wellness next. I don't know if it makes sense to pause and if there's some questions.
That would be great. If we could pause. Are there any questions? If you could speak up because I can't see everybody, that'd be great.
I had a few questions. This is Chris. If no one else wants to go first. So yeah, thank you so much. This was a really in-depth presentation, and I've certainly learned an awful lot about how insurance works. Things make much more sense, so I'm greatly appreciative of you coming out tonight. So just, I guess, a few general questions. I think you mentioned that the insurer, with CT chip, the insurer is able to offer customized plans for each party who participates in the program. Doesn't that work against the whole idea of economies of scale, though? Would we be able to get better pricing if we were all able to agree to a similar sort of plan? And then how does CT chip provide cost savings to individual districts if we are all still, going out and getting individualized plans tailored to our own separate needs? How is it really any different than being on our own? Is it simply the number of people who are in the pool?
All right, so Joe, I'll take the first part of that if you want to take the second.
Yeah.
So as far as plan designs and having differences and economies of scale, the fact of the matter is with insurance pricing, 85 to 90% of your rate is driven by your claims. The administrative piece of things makes up only about 10% of your overall cost. So in a perfect world, it would be awesome if all 9 entities had the exact same plan. That would be easier for Cigna administratively. Honestly, though, it really wouldn't move the needle nearly as much as having a lot fewer high claimants would. It's just that the administrative piece is just such a small part of it that while that could help a tiny bit, it wouldn't be as much as you would think.
Yeah, and Chuck, I might just add.
If I could just chime in, Joe, I'm sorry, real quick. The other piece of that would be that each entity would have to go to their unions to negotiate one plan. So we'd be likely working off of what are the best elements of all plans. So by the time it was all said and done, it is likely that it would be a much richer plan than we currently have, because you can't offer less than what we currently have. It has to be better than or equal to what we currently have. And that's true in probably every contract for every municipality and district.
Yeah, I was kind of talking about the theory of it, right? In practice, to Kristen's point, it's basically impossible.
Correct.
We've all been there at late night negotiations, 2:00 in the morning across the table from CEA, and you got to get the deal done. And if that means coming down a little bit on RX copays or something, you do what you got to do to get where you need to on the wages side of things. And now all of a sudden you've agreed to a plan that doesn't align with what everybody else in CTCHIP has. So just logistically, it's actually probably impossible.
Yeah, and I agree completely with both those statements. And I think I just add that, nowadays the adjudication process is so automated, and believe it or not, even though there's differentiation between the plan designs, they're fairly close. You all have some, for the most part, some variation of a high deductible health plan. And then where the tweaks are is just what are those exact deductibles? And then maybe, like Chuck said, does somebody have a 10, 15, 30 drug copay versus a 0, 25, 40 drug copay. So those things from an automated perspective make adjudication, it doesn't make an issue. In theory, does Cigna have to create less documents and spend a little less time on, working on employee summaries? Yeah, but to Chuck's point, that's pennies on the dollar when you're talking about 10% overall admin costs. As far as the second piece of it, so where do we really kind of drive the savings? We often say, right, so the idea behind pooling together is to get to a point where your claims and your increases from year to year are more predictable, they're more stable, less variable. That clearly wasn't the case this year. But we found out why, right? So at least we can explain why it wasn't the case. But, I'm sure Chuck would agree too, I work with many larger municipalities and public schools, about 500 and up is my average size client. And what we see for those clients is, we're often our year is made or broken by the number of large claimants. But overall, it's the change in the number, right, that drives the change. So we do find that these larger pools are just more predictable and less variable over time. And then it's the other piece of it, right? We do know that we will get more attention. We'll be able to do more creative programming than if you were on your own. We're a bigger fish for Cigna to worry about than if we were just 150 employees.
Thank you. Hey, Joe, can you stop sharing for 1 second? I just want to show these guys something.
That's good. My screen's frozen anyway, so hopefully it'll unfreeze. Did that work?
Yep, looks good here.
Okay, I'm still frozen for some reason, but.
Are you guys seeing this claims report here?
Yes, Chuck, thank you.
So this is hot off the press. Literally just got this from Cigna yesterday. These are Bolton's claims through the first 4 months of the year. And so just so you guys can see, I highlighted the two key numbers here. Your gross claims thus far through 4 months are a little over 1 million, 1.08 million. And your premium during that time is 946,000. So just 4 months into the year, you guys already are not running great. So, in any given year, you're going to be the good group in the larger group, or you're going to be the bad group in the larger group, and things are going to shake out over time. But certainly I would say through a third of the year now, I would think whatever we're able to achieve from a renewal standpoint with CTCHIP is probably beneficial to Bolton, because you can see that the year has started off not great. So this is where we would rely on those large numbers, like Joe's talking about, of, hey, the group as a whole runs better, maybe lifts Bolton up this year. And then next year you flip the table and you guys help out.
So it is the case that the increases are not different for each party depending on their claims history. It is averaged out over all the parties.
Yeah, the way that CT chip is set up, everyone receives the same baseline rate to rate renewal increase. The only thing that would differ is if you guys negotiated with your teachers and had a different plan design this year. So, groups that had a 19 last year, but a lot of plan changes may have had a bottom line 14, but that's because they negotiated changes. Rate to rate, everyone was the same.
Okay. And then my last question is, since you've made it clear and shown how having more people in your pool is going to help you get better rates and also be more predictable and thus not have the sort of jumps that we've historically had. So how do we get more people into CT CHIP? What are the challenges for getting other towns to join us? Or conversely, why don't we go out and I apologize because I forget the name of the other organization you mentioned early on that is self-funded, ECHIP. Why don't we go out and join ECHIP and, put our people in with a much bigger pool so that we can benefit from that economy of scale?
So we looked at ECHIP. We started there, Joyce, Silly, and I, and we had probably a year's worth of meetings with East Con and ECHIP about it. But how ECHIP is, each entity is still responsible for their own claims. So, our 8% increase would have been just that. Plus, we would need stop loss insurance. So they have not just pulled everything together where it's just one big group, for example, like a South Windsor does, but South Windsor is one school system. This is multiple entities, but they still are separated, if you will, within that scope. We had looked at Hebron, Andover, and Marlborough had put together their own little collaborative. We had looked at that. That was not something that we felt was right for us at the time it was starting, which is how we got to CT CHIP.
Yeah, and I might just add, Kristen, if it's okay, what we found. So in addition to being the consultant for CT CHIP, I do represent one entity, Columbia Town and Board. And we had also, reached out to ECHIP to find out if there was an opportunity for Columbia. And what we found out in those conversations, and that's where we kind of met Larissa, because Larissa also worked with ECHIP, is that there were more small towns looking at ECHIP, but their exposure to stop loss was fairly significant. So in ECHIP, our stop loss at ECHIP is $175,000. So if you had one claimant at $175,000, that might be okay. But if you had 2 or 3 of those, you would be liable up to $175,000 for each of those. So that model didn't really work out well. So you might say, well, then why, Joe, did you say earlier that may be a goal we work towards? There are other ways that we can be creative with stop loss. You could use lower stop loss levels, for example, but that gets pretty costly. But there's ways that we can kind of layer stop loss, kind of like big insurance companies do, to limit liability at each entity level, but maybe still get us away from a fully insured model where we are liable for our own claims and able to build up reserves.
The other piece too, I think, was a question about bringing others in. And we had that goal as we started out the first year. We had marketing materials. I know Larissa and Joe did several presentations. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys, right?
Right.
And, but then, we start to see what our rate's going to be and who wants to hop on for a 19% increase, right? If it had been a 2 or 3%, I think we would have had quite a few takers. So I think, in a year that we're running well, may be a good opportunity to add other small entities, but right now, that's a pause, I think, at this point. Did I capture that correctly?
Yeah, Kristen, I'd say that's right. I would also add, it's hard to add groups to a collaborative. I just know it from seeing it across the state in the various collaboratives that exist. Because in any given year, either the group that wants to come in is running poorly, and now the collaborative doesn't necessarily want them, or they're running great and they don't really need you. It's very hard to get the stars to align and have people come in. It's just, it's a challenge. You've got to find kind of where you're at the same mix, and the decision makers on both sides understand the long-term goals of it and can pull the trigger.
And I would just add that, I'm trained as an underwriter before I kind of came into this role. And one of the things that we underwriters like is known risk, right? So what I have suggested, although it's just opinions, right? The board can choose what they want to do. What I have suggested is that, we really need a nice couple of years of being who we are as a pool. So we've established that baseline. And then to Chuck's point, as we start to market more and look at other entities, we have a better idea of really how they are comparing to us, right? So, this year, are we going to see another increase in large claimants? Will we see a decrease in large claimants? Will we stay about the same? But it'll establish some predictability for us. And so for me as an underwriter, that's what I like, right? I like knowing who my risk pool is before I start to introduce other people into it. So I would suggest, although it's my opinion and not the board's, that we probably won't even entertain people coming in this year, but look to maybe next year to expand once we kind of do have a better idea of where we're sitting.
It's my guess that the board is going to want to, the CT chip board is going to want that as well.
Thank you for the very thorough answers. This has been very helpful.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for this part? All right. I think we're ready for part 2, Joe.
For wellness, yeah. So let me start to share again. All right, so I did mention before that Cigna was willing to offer a $60,000 annual wellness fund. So those are funds that we can use for health improvement, wellness activities, challenges across all of the entities. We engaged in several initiatives already, and we have one ongoing now. I will say that COVID threw us a little curveball in that it's a little difficult to do a lot of on-site activities right now. But I think we've been creative in how we've handled that so far. But the first thing that we did, which doesn't sound all that impressive, but provided us with a lot of great information, is we just simply did a survey. So we surveyed all participants in CT CHIP. Anybody who participated in the survey was given a $25 gift card that was funded by Cigna, so that came out of our wellness fund, didn't cost any entity any money. We had 338 participants, or 60% of the population, respond, which for those of you who are used to doing surveys, you would know that a 60% response rate is very good. We got a lot of really helpful information. And the last bullet there shows that we had pretty consistent interest. So not one stood above the other. Stress management, fitness and nutrition programs, team challenges, and group workshops. So we kind of set forward to kind of encompass that into our goal. And we'll talk about that a little bit at the bottom of this page. Additionally, Larissa was able to engage with a company that does scans It's a carotid intimal media thickness screening, or what we call CIMT and what they call CIMT. And it's basically a screening of your arteries, and they measure the layer of your arterial wall. Beyond that, clinically, that's about the top of my clinical experience. But what it's designed to do is identify potential risks for stroke and heart attack. Frankly, I was a little surprised. I didn't know how many people would be interested in this. Larissa, I think I owe her a cup of coffee, said everybody's been really interested in this. So we reached out to the board. We said, hey, we have this opportunity. Can we offer this to employees? They said, sure. Cigna agreed that, yes, this was an expendable expense or allowable expense. Our initial interest was over 100. So the board, I forget the numbers, I could pull them off if I needed to, but the board initially allowed so many slots. We quickly exceeded the number of slots available. And so the board offered additional slots available. So we had over 100 interested employees from all entities. We were just in the scheduling process when COVID hit. So we had to cancel all of our efforts. And luckily, Cigna was very gracious. Any leftover funds from last year, which we could not spend because of COVID, they allowed us to roll over to this year. So we got the $60,000 this year plus rollover from last year. And one of the first things that we were able to do was over the last month and a half, 2 months, we've been able to restart scheduling the CIMT screenings. And to date, we've had at least 83. And Larissa, if you want to jump in, I think we've got another 20 or 30 scheduled, and maybe some of those have already happened.
We do. We have additional scans that are going to start on Monday of next week. And we are at 38 additional scans coming through in this second round.
So already surpassing our original 100 plus participants. And the feedback, which is why we offered it again, the feedback from the initial 83 was very positive. So this is something that we'll look to kind of do.
Just as a side note, sorry, Joe, the side note, I was notified by the technician who came out and did the scans for Bolton that the Bolton Fire Department is going to be reaching out to her directly to see if they can also provide scans going into the future.
Oh, great. So the last thing that we did, which I'm calling year one, but it's technically happened in year two, but I'm calling it year one because it was to be our year one challenge. Due to COVID, we had to be a little creative. We had hoped to provide a wellness challenge across all the entities because people weren't at work and weren't able to get together to participate in challenges. The committee got very creative. And let me just say that the Wellness Committee is comprised of one or two, actually 2 or 3 individuals from each entity. And it's a very active, very engaged group. And so we quickly moved from a kind of structured program to a do-it-yourself program. And it was very simple. We provided a calendar over the 5 weeks of July. We provided some sample activities, but you didn't have to do the sample activity. You could do whatever you want. And we said, if you perform at least one wellness activity during a week, any week, you qualify for a raffle for that week. If you perform a wellness activity, at least one in each of the 5 weeks, you qualify for an additional larger raffle prize. And we saw that we had 98 participants. So about what's 20% of our group, which might not sound big, but for wellness, that's pretty big. And since we weren't in person, I was really pleased with those numbers. 90% were active all 5 weeks. 76 were motivated to be active based on the challenge. And 81% were motivated to engage in a mindfulness activity. So I skipped over that, sorry. So the wellness challenges themselves, they weren't just physical. So it was a physical wellness activity, nutritional wellness activity, or a mindfulness activity qualified. And so I was pleased to see that 81% of the people engaged in mindfulness because of this, right? They weren't normally doing mindfulness activities, and this challenge urged them to do that. So we had great results with that. So now we're in year 2. We've got the second round of screenings going now. And then we've just started our second do-it-yourself challenge. So kind of boring. We're using the same type of format. It's now the same kind of structure, do one activity each week. We're doing November, so it's the 4 weeks of November. But we added a lot more opportunities for individuals to earn raffle prizes. And in particular, the way they're going to earn more raffle opportunities is by focusing on 3 areas that we think will connect better to the health plan itself. And so we're encouraging participants to complete the Cigna Health Assessment. We're encouraging employees to sit through an employee assistant program webinar, and then we're encouraging folks to schedule preventive exams. So far, it's early on to tell. We unfortunately, we don't have a tracking tool that tells us how many people are engaged. It's a report after the fact. So we can report back to Kristen in December, maybe January, by the time we get all the data with how that went. The committee will be meeting very soon to talk about the rest of this fiscal year, so things that we'll be doing in January and beyond. And then we obviously always have ongoing employee assistance programs. So the board is very focused on that, and we are communicating that on a very frequent basis to remind employees that service is there for them. And with that, if there's any additional questions.
Does anybody have any additional questions? If you could just shout out, because I can't see you.
I have one.
Okay.
So the wellness program sounds fantastic. I'm glad it's available for our employees. I was curious whether you are able in any way to assess what percentage of the people who chose to take part were people who would not otherwise have been engaging in physical activity or mindfulness exercises. In other words, is it reaching people who are already doing these things anyways, or because presumably the goal would be to encourage people who are less active than they should be to become more active?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So right now it's all based on self-reporting. And so that is a question that we asked them in the first survey, and I forget the exact statistic, but it was what I would say a large amount of people did the wellness program that wouldn't have otherwise done it if it wasn't for the program. We had a couple of comments came through. One was a gentleman who golfed once a week, and he said he stopped taking the golf cart and started walking. Someone else said that they started walking like 10 minutes a day, and they feel like it's changed their life. So, when we talk about wellness, and I'm sure, Chuck, if you've ever discussed wellness with this group, wellness is one of those things, it's hard to determine the return on investment. But, we hear a story like that, right, where somebody started walking 10 minutes a day and now it's part of their life. I mean, that person might lose 5 pounds. That might keep them from becoming a diabetic if they were pre-diabetic. And, that's a $60,000 claimant. So it's hard to measure those things, but we do ask those questions in the survey. Ultimately, in this round, what we'll see is we will get to measure, because Cigna can report how many health assessments were actually taken and how many people sat through an EAP presentation. So we actually will get some real data that says, okay, here's the people who engaged in that.
And we'll look to build off of that information each time we expose folks to something for wellness. Just to kind of loop in on when we went over the claim review, and you saw that Bolton really didn't have much in the area of large claims. So what that says there are some manageable, maybe some disease management programs that we can put in place that are more focused on folks who may have diabetes or heart risk issues that don't have access or didn't know that there are access points through Cigna that can help support them in being proactive with their care. So a lot of what we'll grind down on as we move forward is getting some of that specific information. It will be on an aggregated basis, but it will give us a lot of good information so we know, okay, this audience, we should talk more about stress management, or we should focus more on ergonomics. So it's going to help us really grind down on the data that we receive so we can really make sure we're bringing the information that's necessary for the group to help drive better results.
And I just, Joe and Larissa, thank you for the info on the wellness. You know, this is another benefit of being with CT Chip, right? The long-term underwriting aspects is really what drove the decision for all the groups that are part. But things like this, if you were a 150 life group instead of a 600 life group, you wouldn't get a $60,000 wellness. You wouldn't get all the exact same support that you get. You know, you just get those additional benefits by being part of a larger group of folks.
Absolutely. I'd also like to thank Joe and Larissa and Chuck very much for being with us tonight. I'm sorry we ran later than I thought we were going to at the start. I apologize, and I'll apologize in advance because I think I set this ball rolling for Joe and Larissa to do this for all the boards. But I think I am watching the faces, and I know that this was very informative. So I want to thank you all very much. Does anybody else have any other questions? Okay, I would also like to thank Beth, who serves as our representative on our wellness committee.
You notice that Beth has her bike in the background, right? So she's
right, exactly.
a model member of the wellness committee.
Very model, yes, indeed. So thank you guys very much.
Thank you guys.
Thanks for having us.
Good night.
Good night. All right. So I hope you guys found that informative. Looking for a thumbs up. Thumbs down in the middle. There we go. Okay, thanks. All right, we are on to grants. Casal, you're on for sharing. Okay, so this first part is not new. It's an overview that we provide each year of each one of our grants. What I would like to call your attention to first and foremost is Medicaid, which is number 3. So we have been participating in Medicaid, but the cost benefit analysis is not to our, we are not really totally benefiting from this at this point. It is a tremendous amount of work on both Beth's part and her teachers in special education, and Casal's part on the finance part. We also have to pay an outside agency to help support us because it is a very complicated process to be able to file these claims. And how often do we have to file them, Casal?
We do quarterly administrative reporting, and then we do an annual cost report at the end of every year.
Okay, thank you.
But our therapists report monthly. They have to report on every time they do a service with a kid. So daily, weekly, monthly, they're reporting as well.
Right, thank you. So the district has a 16% reimbursement rate due to low Medicaid consent forms. Consent is required. The parents must give consent in order for us to file for Medicaid, which is well below the state average of 41.45%. Now, I'll offer that state average is driven by some pretty large, particularly urban districts that often have a person totally dedicated to this. We are examining this year the feasibility of whether or not we're going to continue to participate, at least for this year. We are down a person in the finance office. We are down 2 special ed teachers. You know, we're hanging on, I think I say it repeatedly, by a shoestring at this point. And it is likely that we're going to owe money to the federal government from the, what is it, Casal, the 2018-19 year?
Yes, 18-19, we're going to owe at least $12,000.
So
it's not finalized yet. Plus, we don't know if we're going to owe money on the 1920 cost report that's coming up sometime next year.
So, we get money and then we got to turn around and give back money. And it takes years for them to do that analysis to come, as you can see, because we're in 2021 and we're talking about the 18-19 year. So for this year, hitting the pause button on Medicaid. We do currently have 47, I think roughly, and we'll get to that on that page, $1,000 in money that rolls over, because this has to be used for specific purposes and is allowed to roll over. Part of the reason why it's allowed to roll over is because then they come back and say you owe money. If we could scroll down further, Kasal, please. So then we have Title I, Title II, Title III monies. And those are two-year grants ending every 6/30. And CREC manages our Title III, but that's changing, Kasal, correct?
Correct. We're picking that up this year. They're still the fiscal agent, but before they handled the purchasing and everything. So when we needed something, it was a direct contact to say, I need to buy this. Can you put in a purchase order? And CREC would handle that whole process. Yeah. We're picking that up. So we will be making the purchases and then we will be requesting for reimbursement because it's more timely for our needs.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Can you go to the next page, please? Okay, and then we have, I'm gonna move my, Title IV, which we're never 100% sure if we're getting Title IV monies or not. As you're aware, we have received Title IV monies for this year. And they've put in conditions that have to be met. And it seems like the conditions may change a little bit from year to year when they do decide that Title IV monies are going to be allowed or offered. The ESSER grant you're aware of that we applied for, that was $17,000 and some odd dollars. We'll get to that page in a minute. That went towards the purchase of computers. And then we have the Coronavirus Relief Fund, and both the ESSER and the Coronavirus Relief Fund are one-time onlys. And again, we're being told that that's not counting towards our total costs or expenditures. And then we have open choice. If we could scroll down a little further, Kasal, please. Thank you. Open choice, which the purpose is to enhance and enrich, and to the funds made available to supplement, not supplant. And then the same for CHEF. And the CHEF grant, Sarah writes, and it has to be approved by the CHEF office. There's a fair amount of back and forth with them. There is a new CHEF office grant approver. The previous person retired. It's been an interesting process. I'll leave it at that. If we could go on to the next page, please. So then we have the Perkins grant. So CREC was the administrator, correct, Kasal, of, yes, of this Perkins grant. And correct. Last year, say again?
They were the consortium fiscal agent.
Okay. Last year, in the fall, they decided they weren't going to do that anymore. I don't think it was, I think it was part of a look at the reorganization and aspects of CREC, and I don't think they saw it as being a financial win for them. So it got kicked back and we had to figure it out. We weren't big enough. We didn't receive enough monies to be on our own. We only received about $5,000. So we joined forces with Summers, wrote together. This is extremely restrictive. We end up not being able to use a lot of the monies because of all of the restrictions that are put in place. And for the fact that we're a small high school and don't offer some of the programs that they allow money in. So this is one of those grants that for this year, we're going to hit the pause button on for the $5,000 because we can never use that amount. And you'll see that in a few minutes. And then the other grants you can see there, as well as the last grant is Amplify, which is another grant that I just want to call to your attention. This is a regionally funded support for student wellness. We have tried to get in touch with someone at Amplify because we have monies left over from last year because of COVID, that we had presentations and things scheduled that weren't able to happen. We can't even get anybody to call us back. So I'm not even sure if anybody works in that office anymore or what the story is. It is a very limited amount of funds, around $2,000, well, maybe a little bit more than $2,000. This is a grant we're not going to be participating in this year either, because it's for things like bringing in speakers and things like that, as well as every 5 years or so, they give us a report about alcohol and drug use or whatever. So we will come back and relook at whether or not this is the right option for us for that, if in fact this even still exists, because like I said, we can't get a soul to call us back. All right, Casal, if we could go on to the next page, please. So this is how we spent our monies in 1920, just a review of all of the areas in which the money was spent. And you can see there the ESSER is listed there, the $17,146. We have the open choice, we have the chef piece, and all of the titles. And you can see also in Medicaid as well. Okay, can we go to the next page, please? And then we have here our Perkins. You can see the limited amount of money that was, and the $161 that we were able to spend out of the Amplify grant. We had a total of 4.93 FTEs in the 1920 grants. Are there any questions on 1920 before I move on to this year's budget?
Kristen, the grand total is the total that we actually spend. How does that compare to the amount that we were projecting to receive? Or that we were, because you said we weren't able to spend some of the grant monies.
Yeah, hang on a second.
The amounts that were related to the federal grants, the Title I's and the Special Ed IDEA grants, anything there that we're not unable to spend, those were allowed to be carried over into the new year due to COVID. Some of the other ones that are the 1 year grants, most likely those will have to get returned back to the grantors.
So anything that was carried over to the current fiscal year will be reflected in the next part of the presentation? Okay.
Correct.
Okay, I don't hear any others. Casal, can you move on to this year, please? Okay, so you can see in IDEA what we're projecting for salaries in professional services, supplies, and tech equipment for a grand total of $169,902, and we had carryover funds of $10,685.05. In IDEA 619, again, you can see the categories. We had carryover funds of $3,189.28. In the Medicaid, there's the $47,575.15 that I alluded to previously, that we have in carryover funds there as well. In Title I, we had carryover funds of $4,376.26. And then in Title II, we had carryover funds of $5,137.02. In Title III, we had $1,533.46. In Title IV, we had very limited carryover funds, $642.73. In the COVID relief funds, I shared that with you earlier in the presentation, and you saw that we spent down to the last penny of that money with PPE, cleaning supplies, and health and safety components related to COVID. And they are components that we have already purchased and have in hand. For open choice, You can see that we had a carryover of $115,371.44. That is less than amounts that we have had in previous years, quite a lot less, actually. We also have less students with us in choice. Looking for my numbers. This year, we have 48 students. We have 0 kindergarten students. I think a lot of that is attributed to the fact that parents didn't want to put their kids on a bus in the middle of a pandemic and have a long bus ride. I think a lot of parents made decisions about either keeping their kids home or going to their neighborhood school closest to them. And enrollment is down in Hartford. There is some Hartford flight that is happening that I've been talking about for the last 2 years. We've seen it in our own district with some families that have moved out of Hartford. They'd like to remain in Bolton. They'd like to remain choice students, but they can't because they don't live in Hartford anymore. Last year, we had 51 kids. The previous year, we had 58. Before that, we had 53. And back in 16-17, we had 63 students. So, you can see some of the decline there, and that equates a decline in funds. You can also see, the various things that are in these various grants, whether they be positions or supplies, subscriptions, professional development. It kind of runs the gamut. And you'll see too, I'll wait till we get to the next page where I can talk about this part. Casal, can you go to the next page? So you can see here, the team piece, that's a guess right now. That's the amount of money we got last year. But how that works is the state takes the number of new teachers throughout the state. They have a pile of money, and then they divide that out, and each new teacher, if you will, mentor, gets allotted an amount. So we have no idea right now. I'm not even sure when we're going to know that, to be quite honest. So that is that's our best guess at a number right now. We really have no idea. We have total grant positions of 5.18 FTEs. So a perfect example of this is, Casal, if you could go back to the previous page. In last year's grant, Casal, can you scroll down to Chef? I believe it was Chef.
Yeah, it was Chef.
Yeah. So the percentage of a guidance position in the Chef grant last year was much lower. We had a veteran guidance counselor who left us, who was at a higher salary. So it's a dollar amount, right, that we had to get to. So that was that percentage. And this year we have a new guidance counselor at a much lower salary number than the one who left. And so the percentage is higher. So you'll see fluctuations like that each year. So I just want to call that out as well. So if we could go to last page again, Casal, please. So you'll see, that the grand total that we're anticipating is $973,175. Questions about this year's budget?
I have a question about the carryovers for the choice funds. I think my understanding, and I hope is correct, if not, you can correct me, is that one of the reasons we carry over so much from year to year is because we use those funds to pay tuition that might be due at the start of a school year to the kids who are going out of district, and also for transportation costs. Is that correct? We want to carry some over, in other words, in order to meet expenses at the start of the new school year before we actually start receiving new choice money.
Absolutely. Because Casal, when do we get the first round of funds if we're lucky?
If we're lucky, they typically give us an advance in December.
Right.
And then we don't actually get the rest of our funds until
May. Sometimes late May. So, it is incumbent upon us, I think, in many respects, to be able to carry over some monies so that we have a place to start at the beginning of the year, because we have expenses directly related to choice at the beginning of each year, whether it be salaries or support for choice students directly, after school monitors for choice students to be able to stay so that they can get homework help, or they can stay for sports and take the late bus, whatever the case may be. But without it, we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. That's a great point. Thank you, Chris. I should have covered that. Sorry, but thank you. Other comments? All right, hearing none. I'm going to move on. Thank you, Casal, very much. It was a lot of hard work. To our BPS learning update. So I would like to start by sharing that after careful examination of health data and our current learning plan with the Eastern Highlands Health District and Bolton's Emergency Management Director, the Bolton Public Schools will remain in our current learning plan through December 23rd. BCS K-5 students will continue 4 days a week of in-person learning on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, with Wednesdays remaining as a distance learning day from home for all students. And grades 6 to 12 are going to remain in the hybrid model, with Wednesdays remaining a distance learning day. And again, just a reminder that families who opted for full-time distance learning will be allowed to continue to learn from home. This is all contingent upon health data staying in relatively good shape. We were orange last week for the previous 2 weeks. I was thrilled today when I got on it, 402, that we are yellow for the previous 2 weeks. And honestly, next week we could be red. It's just, if you look at the current map, there are 100 plus communities who are in the red right now in the state of Connecticut. So I guess I'll offer it's simply a matter of time. We did hear Chris share tonight about CREC's plan for the week after Thanksgiving. And I have asked the Department of Health on our Tuesday morning calls. I've asked the question of Rob. I've asked the question of the Commissioner of Education. And the message has continuously been that we just shouldn't be making a determination about closure. However, I happen to know from the CREC superintendent that they have over 100 staff members who are going to have to quarantine. And so they will not have enough staff to open school. We will be sending out a survey. I talked to Rob Miller, Eastern Highlands Health District Director, and Jim Rupert about it this afternoon to staff, asking them to identify if they're going to be traveling over the holiday weekend, which would mean that they would have to quarantine, because I want that data to try to make a preemptive decision about whether or not we need to do the same thing.
This is interesting.
It may be for 2 weeks, quite frankly. And I have shared this repeatedly, we're hanging on by a shoestring with our staff. We have situations where staff aren't feeling well, and normally in any other time, they would have come to work because that's what teachers do, because they're super committed. You can't now. You have to stay home and you have to go get a test. And we're waiting 5 to 6 days for test results, which means 5 or 6 days that you're not in the classroom. And if you're really sick, you're not able to teach from home. And we've got this cadre of subs, that kind of a cadre, I guess, for each building, who are just in our buildings, because I don't want them going to Coventry and then coming to Bolton. That does not serve us well. So stay tuned on that, I guess, is what I have there. Any questions for me on that part? All right, hearing none. Mr. Maselli, Mr. Giard, Ms. Johnson, and Ms. Safran have and Mrs. Malinowski, a blended learning video to share with you.
Am I introducing it, Joe?
I don't know what's going on here.
So I think I'm introducing it.
Okay.
He's muted, so I don't know if he's talking to me. I see him talking.
Sorry, that was my cue.
All right. So, hi, everyone. It's my pleasure to be able to introduce this video this evening on blended learning and how our Bolton Public Schools have really adapted in these unprecedented times. It has been an incredible challenge during this extraordinary school year, and I would be remiss if not saying that it has been a labor of love, hard work, just an amazing amount of all you got. I have to just say it's about all you got from not only our teachers, our staff, our students, our families. It has just, when I hear the line, I think people are tired of hearing it. We're in this together. We really have been. And I feel like this video this evening, it's so little spoiler alert. It's really just very uplifting because it is a result of what happens when we all do this together. And as exciting and as I feel after viewing this and I got to have the preview, I do want to thank our teachers, our community, our families, our staff, Board of Education, my colleagues, my administrative team. I feel like you're my siblings at this point. We're never apart. Superintendent Hecht, all of the board, if I haven't said that, for how you've supported us in this very hard work. Thank you. The year is going to continue to challenge us. We know it, but we're excited about what we're learning. We're excited about seeing where this can take us in our future. And so with no further ado, please enjoy. Thanks, Joe.
With our friends at home. So let's start with Riley. Can you unmute and say good morning? Thank you for sharing those friends that shared.
Amelia Bedelia helps out, and I'll show my class. Nanny that comes to somebody's house.
We are increasing students' ability to be able to talk with each other and communicate to me within the classroom setting. Those students that are at home, remote learning, really get to feel that active part of being part of the class and get to see their classmates.
So while I am teaching the group in the room, we're doing the same activity as the other cohort that's at home for the day. And I'm able to speak to both groups and engage both groups.
But it's been going really well. The students in the school are able to see their friends at home, which is really awesome, even though they're learning remotely. But that's still a big piece, is that social piece where they can still see their friends at home, which is really important.
We see all the faces on the screen and we feel like one class. We're making this model work. The students feel safe, they feel welcomed, they feel comfortable, and they're ready to learn every day.
Our students returned from a long absence, and their social and emotional well-being was definitely something that we really, really wanted to focus on.
So we tried a little mini chair yoga, I think the second week of class, and this group loved it.
So anything you can take from this, that's yoga. Yoga is either doing all this fun postures or doing nothing at all and enjoying a great day.
We have a connections activity each week where our teachers meet with students, small groups, and we're reaching out to try to learn the needs of our students and provide some supports for them.
It says, I pledge to be open, accepting, kind, non-judgmental, and an ally for my classmates. Full bodies.
I think one of the most important positives is the kids and their resilience in continuing to work well with what's a challenging situation. It's tough for kids these days sometimes to really get into the program, and the kids are coming. The kids are coming to class. They're coming to class prepared.
And one thing I've noticed is it's giving us an opportunity to sort of foster our problem-solving skills. We have to do some troubleshooting. Maybe if something doesn't upload.
We've got, of course, we've had technological glitches and that kind of thing, but the kids work work through them, and they stick with it. And I think the whole thing's been really good.
I say, hey, try that again. If not, we'll find an alternate solution. And not only that, but the students are coming up with solutions as well, which has been helpful to us teachers that are also trying to figure out this whole blended learning. But we're all in this together, and we're working for it.
He was orphaned at a young age, and he was raised by his foster father, John Allen. That's where his middle name comes from.
We're trying to be as creative as we can with different forms of technology and different programs, and the lessons that they're planning. It takes, an immense amount of time to plan a very engaging and thoughtful lesson. And how do we engage both groups? How do we engage them to work with one another?
And one of the most important things that I try to do is make sure that the kids at home remain engaged. When you can't see the students, sometimes it can be hard to know if they're still there. So I start by requiring them to speak up for attendance, just like if they were in the classroom. And then I continually try to ask engaging questions and prompts for the kids at home as well as in the classroom.
And on the opposite side, the students in the room get to then be engaged with those students at home. So it really increases that student interaction piece that really helps with their learning process.
People who are presenting turn on their monitors, so everybody's able to see them and participate with them. And then the class can ask questions, and we project them on the smartboard, so everybody's looking at the same time together.
They really enjoy the hands-on activities that we were able to do before while maintaining safety precautions, cleaning the materials that we're using. But so far, so good. All right, let's go over our calendar. 16, 17, 18, 19.
Jackson, can you tell me what you have on your forehead? Fiction or nonfiction? Let's see if it matches our friends at home. Do they all have fiction on their forehead?
Google Classroom is amazing. I probably will never go back to the way I was teaching before. Google Classroom allows for students to turn in their assignments and then allows for me to seamlessly be able to collect the assignments in one spot. I can offer feedback along the way to the students. Those comments don't disappear so that they can constantly go back to get that feedback. They can resubmit assignments for extra help. They can reach out to me through Google Classroom. I can reach out to them. It really is like a one-stop shop for all of their learning needs.
So like I can see how everyone has responded. If I wanted to, I can take a picture of one of their responses and can say like, oh, someone, has an answer of 6. Let's talk about how did we get that answer. I can do things of that nature. So I just think it's neat that I can see kind of where everybody is when they're logging on.
If you go under week 914 to 918, it says Monday due now. So I've listed here's a list of all the terms. And what I would like for you to do is to go through the flashcards, do the learn activity, and then go down and do.
About this year is that every student now has a Chromebook that they bring back and forth from home to school. And one thing that we have been using in 3rd grade during morning meeting is having each child on their Chromebook. And then we go off into breakout groups. So they go into different Google Meets and they have discussions with each other and then come back and are able to have a whole class discussion about what they talked about with their group.
There are breakout sessions that our teachers are facilitating where they take a student that's in the classroom as well as a student working from home, and they're able to work together in group projects.
Example, in science class, when students are at home, we've been posting videos for them to watch. We use Mystery Science so the students can explore different topics. I've also been able to use my new document camera, so even when kids are kind of towards the back of the room, they can be able to see what I'm writing or working on, and then they can put it in their packet, or if it's a document that we have in Google Classroom.
So remember that atomic number on the periodic table, so that top number. They look at what it is on the phone. Yep, so the number right on the top. Which one has one?
Walking into a classroom and witnessing the blended learning environment that the teachers have created, that the students and families have embraced is truly amazing. The students have learned so much about technology, the use of Chromebooks, online platforms, and are engaging with the material in a way that I've never seen before. And it's just amazing to watch. And being that we were thrown into these circumstances so quickly, I could not have asked for us to be in a better place. And it's really due to the great hard work of teachers, staff, and students. Again, it has been going really well, and blended learning is something that we will be utilizing in the future because it is a great resource and a great way to teach.
Thank you. All right. Now, waiting just for the great job on the video and great job to our staff. Thank you. And we have amazing staff here, Bolton. I cannot say that enough times. They have done and continue to do a huge lift, and they really are supporting each other and have great ideas. Hey, let's try this. The emails are flying all the time about, hey, I tried this, or did you check out that? Or it's just been a full team effort. And I want to commend our administrators. So I think I don't commend enough for the yeoman's work that they continue to do. They are exceptional leaders and they're doing a fantastic job. All right. Mr. Maselli, I believe you're up, sir.
Good evening, everybody. So here is a snapshot of our remote learners. So this is the kind of the third month that we've taken a look at this, and we have some comparisons of things. We've got it broken down by both grade and by town of residence. Remember, with 259 students in the building now, that's down a couple of students from the beginning of the year. We had some folks move away. You know, a child here or there really changes the percentage quite a bit. But I think the overall number in the bottom right-hand corner, the number of students who have, you know, families who've made the decision to keep their students home full-time is up 2.56%. So that's the chart of, you know, the numbers, but really there's a lot more to the story. Certainly the great work that's going on in the classrooms that video just talked to you about. But, you know, there's some other moving pieces to this. So as you may have heard, the CIAC has delayed their final decision about winter sports. They pushed back the original start date that was going to be the 21st of November. And now we are all literally waiting and to see what's going to happen. The head of the CIAC actually sent a survey to me about an hour ago for me to share with the superintendent. So for the two of us to get together and weigh in as they're trying to gather some opinions from administrators around the state before they make their decision. If we have winter sports, we will continue with what we did with volleyball, which will be no spectators, and we've gotten really good at live streaming. I'm really pleased with our hybrid plan. Students, they're not gathering in the halls. They're keeping their distance. They're keeping their masks on. They're working hard. The Wednesday remote day has been critical, giving teachers, you know, a chance to catch up with kids because they can't be staying after school for those retakes, office hours, those kinds of things. So that Wednesday plan is great. The other new piece that I think the superintendent was used the word cadre, and I think she was, you know, the team of the substitutes that we now have at the building, the daily subs, which is new for the high school. Not only is it good to have a daily sub in the building, you know, keeping us safer, as Superintendent Heck mentioned, but also those subs, you know, have started to build a relationship with students and staff. So when they are substituting, it's more of a natural productive experience than maybe it's in the past with substitutes coming and going. They really have become part of our daily routine. On the days when there's no teachers out, those subs are tutoring kids, both live and remote. They're working one-on-one with students. So that's been a great program. And the last thing I'd like to mention is I still receive more positive emails from parents than ever in my 10 years here at Bolton. And even, you know, when it's maybe they're emailing over a particular issue or concern, they're also including expressions of gratefulness to the high school teachers for the amazing work during these challenging times. And that's been very rewarding for me.
Mr. Giard.
First, actually, we're going to start with Ms. Saffron. She's going to review the remote numbers, and then I'll take it from there.
Thanks.
I track these, so I'm going to be your remote update person probably every month. All right, so we are actually, our numbers have decreased. We are now at 84 students, 17% of our population. And if you look over, for the most part, every grade, and if you stay in the purple column, we've gone down. And except for one grade, 6th grade went up 1%. It went up, it changed one student. A lot of these numbers, for the most part, have to do in the K-5 world of students who were remote, and then the families decided to come back once we went full. Some families have reached out to us and they felt like it was the time for their child to transition for a variety of reasons. They felt like we were doing a great job keeping the students safe. We were showing positive, and their children really wanted to come back in. And we did have some students leave the district. We've had a few students homeschool and then return to us. So our enrollment has changed a few times within this last month since reporting. But, overall, we're seeing more students in the building, and we are excited, and we are working closely, I'm sure Mr. George will say, with families of those still fully remote.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Saffron. A couple of things I'm going to mention are a little bit of repeats from Mr. Maselli, but I think it's important for it to be reiterated. First, as you heard in the earlier update from the blended learning video, the staff and the students have adjusted amazingly to the learning shifts of how students are learning at home and in school. The teachers are actually working harder than ever before. The phrase that we've been using often is that they're never able to really turn it off. Students are turning in work late into the evening hours, early morning hours, and it's to no one's fault. It's just that everyone's schedule is different. Work life at home, parent situation is different. So students are turning in work late at night. Teachers are then, even though we tell them you got to have a hard stop, you need to take a break, they still log in late into the evening and provide feedback to students in a timely manner so that they're able to adjust assignments and get those things corrected. A big addition that I can't emphasize enough has been the Chromebooks. The blended learning model would not work if the students did not have those Chromebooks, which they've been very diligent about charging them, bringing them to school, using the carrying cases, which just came in, thank God, because I've seen a few fall, and every time I do, I cringe. So the cases are in, which is a great addition. Remote Learning Wednesdays continues to be a great resource for staff and students. The blended learning model, and we keep saying this, requires a ton of planning and creation of new resources because it is a new model that we're going through. The teachers are using those Wednesdays to meet with students, plan with their colleagues, and to attend professional development. The great work the staff is doing would not be possible without these Wednesdays. One of our constant challenges, and it's getting more so every week, is staffing. Because of different reasons, staff could be out for waiting for test results, being considered a close contact. Their own kids' schools are closed, so they got to stay home to watch their own kids, which seems to be in a couple of other communities why they're closing, because parents have to stay home with their kids and they happen to be teachers. And other reasons that fall within the guidelines to stay home. The teachers are amazing. The first question I get if they are home is, can I still teach? And I say, as long as you're healthy and you're good to go, you can definitely teach from home. So they're amazing about that, but it still requires you to put another adult in the room with the students. So even though they're able to teach remotely, we have to have the daily sub, or sometimes we've had to pull some staff from one class to cover another. And the staff has really been amazing and extremely flexible with getting that done. Lastly, and this one, Ms. Saffron can even acknowledge this one, is it's always heartbreaking to not have the Veterans Assembly. It's one of the favorite events of the year to have all the veterans come in and to see just the joy in their face, and there's always a couple of tears shed. But we recognized our Bolton veterans this year by sending home over 230 student-made cards in the mail last week. And since then, I think we've received at least 15 to 20 phone calls. And actually, we've had some veterans make cards to send back and said, if you could find this kid by this name, I would love for him to see this card. So Ms. Saffron and myself have been tracking down those students. And it really has, you would think something just that simple, a card, but it's just been amazing. And it's the best we could do in these times, and not being able to have an assembly. But fingers crossed that we'll be able to get back to having the assembly next year.
Great, thank you. Any questions for any of the administrators? Anybody? All right, hearing none. We're on to the VHS solar project update. So I have an update from Josh Kelly that I wish to share. The town, in consultation with school officials and in partnership with the Connecticut Green Bank, attempted to acquire a solar installation for Bolton High School in 2020. Due to current economic conditions, however, the Connecticut Green Bank has placed the prospective project on a standby, and the installation will not be moving forward at this time. The town hopes to work with the board and the Green Bank in the spring to bring this project and a possible installation at Bolton Center School forward for consideration. In early 2020, the town engaged the Green Bank, a public institution run by the state that works with private investors to help finance solar installations and other projects that will help lower and limit carbon emissions that are driving global climate change. Green Bank launched a program aimed at towns called the Solar Municipal Assistance Program, or Solar MAP. Solar MAP works with towns like Bolton to identify public spaces where solar installations could be placed and completes a competitive bidding process on behalf of each participating town to further these prospective projects along. There is no cost for this service until the bidding has been completed and each respective town decides whether it will move forward with the low bid installation company or not. Costs associated with these projects are not paid up front, but over a 20-year agreement called a power purchasing agreement, or a PPA. It's usually framed by paying per kilowatt hour. For example, if a proposed installation is estimated to produce 100 kilowatts per day and the PPA requires payment of 7 cents per kilowatt hour, the town would effectively be buying the 100 kilowatts each day for a total of $7. PPA is an all-inclusive of all costs, meaning that it pays for both the solar installation itself and electricity that said installation is creating, and it is held by the Connecticut Green Bank. Thus, each town pays the Green Bank directly for the electricity that their solar installations create. The Green Bank owns and maintains the solar panels themselves. When the town engaged the Green Bank, they identified 2 key buildings that would be ideal for rooftop solar installation, Bolton High School and Bolton Center School. The issue with this concept, however, is that both buildings are scheduled to have their roofs replaced approximately within the next 10 years. The cost of installing, removing, and reinstalling those systems is great enough that the PPA rate would likely be higher than our current electricity bill per kilowatt hour. Thus, those ideas were put on hold. After much discussion about the situation at each school, the Green Bank decided it would make the most sense to wait a couple of years for Bolton Center School roof to be replaced before a solar installation is explored at that site, and Bolton High School may be a perfect location for carport solar installation. Carport solar installations are designs that take a large rack of pitched solar panels approximately 20 feet above parking spaces with the intention of simultaneously protecting vehicles from the elements while creating electricity from the sun's energy. These are generally more expensive than a rooftop solar installation, and this fact played a major role in the bidding process that occurred this fall. Green Bank brought the carport installation concept out to bid last month, and the project received no bids due to current economic circumstances, making the construction of carports while simultaneously delivering a competitive PPA rate for the town of Bolton financially unfeasible. If we want to see a solar installation on the grounds of Bolton High School, we will either have to bring it out to bid again in the spring and hope that economic conditions have improved enough so we can realize savings on the project, or we will have to wait till the high school is re-roofed down the road. The town, Josh says, will reach out to me in the next 3 months to kick off discussions around the bidding process for the spring. I don't know if any board members want to weigh in or have any comments. Okay, hearing none, moving on to unfinished business and policies. So we have second read needed and motions to approve policies, please.
Yes, so do we want to do 2 motions, one for policies for deletion and one for policies with revisions?
That would be great.
Okay. So we're looking for a motion to delete the following policies. 5111.1 foreign exchange students, 5118 non-resident attendance, 5124 reporting to parents, 5131.1 bus conduct, 5131.11 delete video cameras on bus, 5131.7 weapons and dangerous instruments, 5131.81 electronic devices, 5133 cyberbullying, 5141.22 communicable infectious diseases, 5141.231 psychotropic drug use, 5141.24 staff with HIV, ARC, AIDS-related complex, or AID, 5141.27 first aid emergency medical care, 5141.4 reporting of child abuse, neglect, and sexual assault, 5145.6 student grievance procedures.
I'll make a motion to approve the deletion of those 14 policies.
Second, this is Ann.
Motion Chris, second Ann. Do we have any more questions or discussion? I'm sure that it was reviewed thoroughly at the previous meeting. Hearing none, all those in favor of deleting the 14 policies, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That motion passes. Now we are looking for a second motion to revise the following policies: 5123, promotion and retention; 5125, confidentiality and access to education records; and 5141.21, administering medication.
This is Chris. I'll make that motion.
Second, this is Ann.
Again, moved by Chris, seconded by Ann. Is there any questions or discussion on these three policy revisions? Hearing none. All those in favor of revising the policies, please say aye.
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 Anyone who is opposed or would like to abstain? Hearing none. We have revised now those three policies. And
Andrew, I'm sorry for a quick second. Who moved that? And who seconded it again?
Chris and Ann.
Thank you.
Both of them.
Thanks.
Okay. On to new business, resignations.
We have two resignations this month: Andrew Nolan, Business Office Coordinator, and Robin Frost, Cafeteria Worker. We thank them for their service.
Thank you very much. Do we have any future business? Tons of future business. Okay. Non-specific. Now we will be looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you.
Rhea seconds.
All right, and then Rhea, any questions, comments, concerns, discussions, observations on this motion?
All right, can I just ask Chris, Andrew, can I ask you, Chris, and Ben to stay on at the end, please?
Yep, for a brief personnel, yes.
Correct. Yes, please, on negotiations.
Okay, all those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, abstaining. Thank you, everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy. Enjoy Yellow Alert.